Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today and welcome to our webinar. So the topic of the day is migrating to cloud, and we'll cover some essential information on migrating both Refined for Confluence and Refined for JSM from the on-prem versions to the cloud. So I'll start off by introducing the Refined team that are going to be presenting today. I am Sehmi. I work in customer success here at Refined. I've been with Refined for a bit more than 5 years now, working first in support and now in customer success and enablement. So I've always been working very closely with Refined users, helping them solve different challenges using Refined. With me today, I've got Andersen, our data center product manager. Dennis has been with Refined since almost the very beginning, with over 10 plus years with us. He's seen Refined grow from a 2-person operation to the 50 plus team we have today. And he's also led the data center side of the migration assistant work. More on that to follow in this webinar. And then finally, we have Eric Hong, Principal Product Manager for Cloud Platform at Refined. Eric has been with us managing our cloud products since 2020, and he's spearheaded both our current product process and the way of working. One of his many focuses in recent months has been the cloud side of the migration assistant. And here's what we're going to be covering today. So firstly, I'll do a comparison of the on-prem versions of Refined with the cloud versions and go over the similarities and differences between the deployments to set the expectations of what we have for you on cloud. Then we'll take a look at some of the reasons to migrate to cloud, as well as the considerations that you should take into account for this. After that, we'll talk a bit about strategies that you can employ when migrating, depending, of course, on your needs and your setup. And then I'll hand over to Dennis and Eric to take you through a first look at the new migration assistant, which is designed to make your move from the on-prem versions to the cloud versions of Refined as smooth as possible. Eric then has a special treat and will share some highlights from the cloud roadmap to show you what we have in the works for the cloud apps. And finally, we'll have a short Q&A session to close. Just a bit of housekeeping as we get started. We're recording this webinar and we'll send a copy via email after the webinar, along with some useful links that we'll reference during the webinar. The chat is off, but there's a questions panel where you can drop your questions and we'll address these at the end. And then finally, we've put everyone on mute to optimize the viewing experience. All right, on that note, let's get started. So to kick off, let's compare the on-prem versions of Refined and the cloud versions. Sorry about that. So I'll start off here with the underlying infrastructure. On-prem, both for Refined for JSM and Refined for Confluence, the app is deployed directly on the base Atlassian platform. So when enabled globally, it acts almost as a skin on the default Confluence instance or on the default JSM Help Center. It's on the same URL that the native instance is accessed on. Of course, you have the possibility of creating multiple sites with Refined, not using Refined globally. With this option, you can have secondary sites themed with Refined and add select spaces and JSM projects to these sites. But these are still stemming from the native Atlassian instance, and the URLs are extensions of the base URL on Confluence or JSM. The cloud infrastructure is a different ballgame. We couldn't provide our entire feature scope on the default Atlassian Cloud instances, so we needed to find a way around this. Our solution was to develop a SaaS app. So Refined on Cloud is essentially a SaaS with integration apps for both Confluence and JSM. This allows us to provide the same functionality as we can on-prem, on cloud instead, allowing users to create multiple Refined sites and group Atlassian content, spaces, and projects within these sites, as well as the same look and feel features. This setup has opened up a lot of doors for us and given us so much more freedom on cloud on how our sites function. And I'll go more into this soon. Let's compare the deployments further, cloud and on-prem. And to start with, let's talk about the similarities between the cloud and on-premise versions of Refined. Firstly, we have the same key feature scope. You can structure your Atlassian content on Refined sites and group these as needed. You have the option to create multiple sites on both on-prem and on cloud, as many as you need, all from one Atlassian instance. And on the look and feel aspect, you can create similar landing pages using similar modules, regardless of whether you're on-prem or on cloud. Finally, the theming options that are available in product, both on-prem and on cloud, are quite the same. And here are some examples to illustrate what I'm talking about. We've got the cloud version on the left, the data center on the right. And as you can see here, it's the same sort of navigation menus that you can create, similar themes, and similar landing page customization options, albeit with some more benefits on the cloud side. On the other side of the coin, the key differences between the deployments that are useful to know when thinking about migration include the underlying infrastructure that we've touched on before. Having cloud as a separate SaaS, while on-prem is an app deployed on the same base platform. This leads us into a parallel SaaS sort of setup. So on cloud, Refine does not replace the native Confluence UI or the native JSM Help Center as it does on-prem. But on cloud, these exist simultaneously, both accessible via separate URLs. This also means that when you create content, especially on Confluence, this would work a little bit differently on cloud. Your spaces would be created in the native Confluence UI, and then these are exposed on Refine sites. The JSM side, it is possible to create requests directly from the refined UI, same as on the native JSM Help Center. The only difference here would be that you have a refined portal and the native JSM portal. Okay, now let's talk a bit about the why and how of migrating to cloud. Why should you migrate to cloud, and how can you plan this? What considerations should you take? Let's start with some major reasons why companies today are embracing cloud solutions and migrating from on-prem deployments. First off, cloud apps are easier to manage and to administer. The simplified administration equates to less cost in terms of resources spent on managing servers. Updates are so much easier, and the cloud allows for scalability. It removes this administrative burden of managing and maintaining software. Things like downtime, maintenance, and infrastructural headaches are no longer an issue on the cloud. Secondly, cloud enhances productivity by allowing for more centralized hubs. There's less context switching involved for end users, and the cloud applications are generally easier to use and have lower learning curves than on-premise deployments. Thirdly, cloud also allows for new and innovative ways of solving use cases and organizational problems. The big advantage of cloud, running our own SaaS parallel to Atlassian Cloud, means that a lot of things that we couldn't do on-prem are possible to do on cloud. One of these is custom domains on refined sites. As I've mentioned, you can create multiple sites on cloud and populate these with content from Confluence and JSM as you need. And each of these sites can then have its own unique custom domain added to it. So from one Atlassian Cloud, you can run multiple separate refined sites, each serving a specific audience with a unique custom domain added on it for easy recall for your end users. The parallel SaaS setup also gives us a lot more flexibility with what we can do in combining JSM and Confluence content on the same site. You can, for example, build landing pages with modules from both these data sources. And we've also made it possible on Confluence pages themselves to embed request types, ensuring that your end users, while browsing your content, have an easy way to reach out, get in touch with your team, create requests for different purposes without switching context. And once this is done, they can easily go ahead and keep consuming the Confluence content that you have for them. It's also possible on cloud to include the same space or same JSM project on separate refined sites. So you could essentially serve different end users, different audiences, the same content in different theme sites, compete with their own custom domain, all while maintaining the content in one place. We've got thousands of refined users already embracing the benefits of the cloud, all the way from 2017 when we first launched Refine for Cloud. It took us 4 years to get to 1,000 customer-created sites, and since then, just one more year to get to 2,000. And before the end of 2023, we've already hit the 3,000 mark. As of today, we've got more than 3,200 cloud sites built by our customers, meeting different use cases, solving different organizational problems. We currently have enterprise customers on the cloud of up to 35,000 users and individual customers running up to 30 sites. Let's talk a bit about planning your migration and what you should keep in mind. As we all know, migrating from one Atlassian environment to another can be a complex process, and there are several approaches you can consider, depending on your organization's needs, the complexity of your current setup, and your available resources. In this section, we'll share some best practices that you might want to keep in mind when planning a migration from Refined on-prem to Refined Cloud. First and foremost, understand and map out your requirements. Think about what your goals are with the move and what you hope to accomplish in the long term. What's the timeline for your migration? In terms of the base data, the spaces and projects, is some of it ready to move now, or does some of it need to be restructured, improved, and then moved later on? Assess the cloud offering. Compare cloud versus on-prem and think about what works the same, what works differently, and most importantly, how this impacts you. We've covered some of the similarities and differences briefly already, but feel free to dive in more in-depth over at our help center, help.refined.com. Read up on what we have to offer and really gain a deep understanding of what to expect on the cloud side of things. Thirdly, involve the right stakeholders. Collaborate closely with relevant stakeholders and user groups throughout the migration process to ensure that their needs and their requirements are met. Key questions that you need to answer here. How much time can you and your team dedicate to migration? Who needs to be involved? And what does a successful migration look like for them? Finally, create a comprehensive migration plan. Think about your migration strategy and how you're going to deploy on cloud. On a high level, there's two paths that you can take when you're thinking about migrating Refined. You can either go for a lift and shift approach. Here, you take what you have on-prem, on server or data center, and then you migrate this to cloud without any significant changes to your sites or the way that you've set these up and structured them. But then you can also think about how you can re-implement and optimize. It could be beneficial to take a look at your setup, and then before you move to the cloud, think about how you can improve your processes, your workflows, your configurations. This approach could involve significant redesigns to take advantage of new cloud features and optimizing your sites. Think of it as an opportunity to rethink the setup. Evaluate what was working well on-prem and what was not working so well, and then make your game plan from there. Leverage the parallel SaaS setup. What can you split out into multiple sites? What content can you combine into one site? And how can you use Confluence and JSM together on the same site in better ways? With that in mind, let's talk a bit about actual strategies that you can employ for the migration. You've made your plan, you've thought about your high-level approach. How do you carry out the actual migration? So on a high level, here are some strategies that you could think about. You could do a phased migration, where you break the migration into different phases. For example, you migrate one Refined site at a time, or you migrate different teams in stages to minimize disruption and to simplify testing. You could run a hybrid setup where you maintain some Refined sites on-prem and then migrate others into the cloud. This approach is suitable when a full migration is not immediately feasible, especially for larger organizations. You could go for the lean and agile approach, where you implement an agile and iterative migration approach, continuously evaluating, migrating portions, and optimizing small portions of your setup. This minimizes downtime and allows for quick course correction. Start with a minimum viable product, and then build up from there. And then you could go for the all-at-once approach. Simply pick everything from server and data center, move everything to cloud all at once. Typically, this works best for smaller setups and smaller organizations without complex environments. Remember that the best approach for your organization always depends on various factors: could be the size of your instance, your current setup, the complexity of your data, and your specific goals with the migration. Consider working with Atlassian solution partners who are also refined partners. These are the experts who can help you plan and execute a successful migration strategy to your benefit. So previously, migrating refined has involved manually setting up everything from scratch on the cloud. But we're very excited to give you a first look at our brand new migration assistant, designed to make migrating your sites as smooth as possible. I'm going to hand over to Dennis to show you more.
Thank you, Raj. All right. Thank you. So the migration assistant, and as mentioned, our objective with the migration assistant is to make the transition to cloud as smooth as possible and to make the work less manual and more time efficient. The migration assistant will be available for both Refined for Confluence and Refined for Jira on both server and data center. Your Atlassian data, such as spaces, pages, your Jira projects and portals, they are migrated as they are today, perhaps using the Atlassian migration tool. And once that's done, we start the migration process of your refined site. That contains your site structure and such as links, categories, and content. From the on-prem instance, you'd navigate to your site builder and initiate this cloud migration. So let's have a look at how that would work. So in the site builder, you'll notice that there will be a new cloud migration mode toggle. And this toggle will toggle the controls for migrating sites to cloud. If that's not currently being done, you simply flip the toggle to avoid having those buttons present. But if enabled, however, you'll then get a nice little migrate site to cloud button next to your sites. And here you just locate the site you're interested in migrating currently, and pressing that will open up the migration assistant. Once clicked, this will open up the dialog, the initial dialog here, where you, on the start screen, you get a nice little overview with the site being migrated, some information, and some documentation links. First up, you'll have the opportunity to set up links and how these links should behave during your migration. So in Refine, you can add links in many different places. You can have them in your site navigation structure. You can have them on your site and category landing pages through the layout modules that you've defined. And here we give you this overview and the ability to decide on how these links should translate on the cloud instance. And this could be done on a per link basis, or you could create rules to replace any text or part of a link with something else, which could be useful, for example, if you need to update a base URL or company domain URL along the way. Once you're satisfied, you'll move to the next step, which is called the configure step. And in this step, we've highlighted 4 areas where a decision is needed from the user. Each of these will have some context and information, as well as listing the affected resources on your site. And in this example here, we see that this site has configured some custom view permissions for categories and link items in the site navigation menu. The user can see them directly in the list here, or they could download a CSV file as a reference for later use. Finally, you have the actual option, and you have the choice to either keep these view permissions that you have configured. And this could be useful if you know you've already migrated the users and the user groups over to your cloud instance and know that these will be the same. Otherwise, you have the options to remove these if you know that they won't match, and you can set them up later using the reference list. Other options in this section include the layout modules on the landing pages, where you have some options on how to handle those. Also, for the case of Confluence, you'll have such things such as uncategorized spaces as well as archived spaces if those are present in the site structure. Once you've gone over those configure options, the next step is to do an assess of the migration. Here you're first greeted by a summary with some of the key highlights of the site migration and what changes there will be and the differences between your on-prem instance and your cloud instance. But you also have the option to drill down and read more about these differences between the server or data center and cloud instance in the left-hand side here. So here's an example on that where we look at a bit closer on the site administrators that we've set up and how that would translate to our cloud instance. You'll get an explanation of what's different for the specific feature or why it isn't included or why it's handled in a specific way. And often you also have this kind of list of the resources affected. During the assess, there's no active choices to be made as it was on the configure tab, but it's a nice way for you to get information gathered in one place and optionally save these before moving to the next steps and moving the site to your cloud instance. But once you feel like you have a clear picture and feel done assessing the migration, you can continue to the next final steps, which are the export and import. And this is where you're presented with the download button that will generate and save the exported site as a zip file. And once you have that, you finally get some final instructions on how to move to your cloud site and how to carry that file over to the cloud platform. And that's it. The next step is for you to import your server data center site on your cloud instance. And for this and some further cloud information, I will now hand it over to Eric.
Thank you very much, Dennis, for that walkthrough of the migration assistant over on VC and server. So great to see you all today. Today, I'm going to walk you through the migration assistant over on the cloud side after you have exported your site file from on-prem. I'm also going to give some tips of what you can do after your migration to ensure that you are on a good path towards a successful migration. There's some tips that we want to share that could help you in your journey. And then finally, I'm very excited to share recent developments and things that are upcoming in cloud. So what do you do when after you get the export file? First, you're going to go into Confluence Cloud and access the refined app from your apps menu up top in Confluence, and you can click on Get Started. This is going to take you to the site's listing page where you have a button here where you could import your export file. So after clicking on that, that's when you are prompted to name your site. You'll be able to enter a subdomain. And as Raj mentioned, you can also add a custom domain to your site if you want. So after you have uploaded your export file from your on-prem instance, you upload it here, and then you click continue. So after the import is done, you get this notification, this dialog, and the time it takes to import your site will vary depending on the size of your site. This can be a couple of minutes, or it could be an hour or more. And as you will learn when you assess the migration from the DC side, when you assess it. So what I mean by that is when you look at what features are supported or how they're translated over onto cloud. Here you have an opportunity to click on a documentation link as well that will describe that in detail. And one example of what is supported differently over in cloud is that if you have a blog space, that will be imported as a regular space over on cloud, and you can expose your blog posts via news module or a direct link. So that's one of the differences, and you will be able to find all of that in the documentation provide. So at this point, your site is ready for internal review, a proof of concept, or even a trial run. Or if you've chosen to use the lift and shift approach that Raj talked about, it's even ready for use. So now you've migrated. As I mentioned, I'm going to give you some tips. What are some good practices you can do to help your migration journey along? So after migration, this is a really good opportunity to review, evaluate, and adjust. And that's exactly what we did over at Refine when we migrated our intranet. We went through a thought process that I'm going to walk you through. And you can use these tips broadly. So if you have an intranet or a help site or a documentation site, these are fundamental questions that you can ask to help you review and evaluate your setup. Cool. Sorry there. So first off, you want to figure out the purpose of your site. Why does the site exist? What type of content should be on there? Who is your audience? So here you want to think about who are the content consumers, content owners, curators, and admins. It's not uncommon for a site like an intranet, for example, to become quite bloated. That's what happened to us. We had a site that before migration, it became unmanageable. There was a lot of outdated content. We weren't sure who was owning what content and sort of how to maintain it. So we took this opportunity to think about these questions. And the answers to these questions, of course, is going to determine what content is going to live on your site. You might want to have a one-stop shop, for example, and have all the content live on your site, or you might decide that you have too much content for your users to consume. So you might want to split that out into multiple sites. The answer to these questions are also going to impact the structure of your site. For example, permissions. Which user groups or customers do you want give access to your site? How do you want them to navigate your site? You might want to use nav icons, or you might want to structure the nav menu differently depending on your audience, for example. And of course, there's other design elements that come into play. What we did at Refine from a design standpoint was that for all of our landing pages, we decided to go with a look and feel that was consistent across all of them. And that has made the experience much simpler for our users when they're navigating the site. They have a much easier time finding the content that they're looking for. And who is going to maintain the site and how they will maintain the site as well, that will come into play when you review and evaluate your setup. So these are just some tips and considerations to think about. Of course, there's no one size fits all approach. Less, I would say, is often more. In our case, it didn't work to create an intranet that meant everything to everybody. It just became a beast that was unmanageable. So I encourage you to ask yourselves these questions and involve the stakeholders early. So what I mean by stakeholders are the people that will be consuming your site, the people that would be managing it and curating it. Get them involved early and talk about these aspects. It will help your journey along. So now that you have a strategy in place, now it's time to configure the site further. So this is where you can add logos, custom domains, edit your theme, add admins, etc. And thirdly, you'll want to check your layouts. So these are migrated from on-prem to cloud, but depending on what you have chosen in the export, you may not have some modules available, or the modules have been replaced by a best match. So you want to look at those layouts and see if it meets your expectations for look and feel. And if not, you can easily adjust them via our page builder. And finally, if you're stuck or if you need additional support, please visit our migration center or contact support. There will be a list of resources that will be sent to you post webinar, where you can find the links that we have been referencing in our presentation here. So now it's time for the roadmap. I'm going to go over what's been recently released and what is coming up. So earlier this year, we released what we call the page builder. This is what you know as the layout editor over on DC server. However, on the cloud side, this page builder is what you see is what you get editor, a WYSIWYG editor, and it has much more flexibility and control for you to apply your brand and your design guidelines. And secondly, we've also released EU data residency. This will allow you, after you've migrated, to migrate your instance over to the EU or performance or data residency requirements. Now for Q4 this year, we are looking to add full support for forms. So this is what you know of as Proforma on-prem. It is available natively on JSM Cloud. We already support it, but there's a couple limitations left. And soon there will be full support for forms. You're also going to be able to use landing pages on spaces. So on DC, the category homes are used as landing pages, but on cloud, you have the option to use the landing page on the spaces. And that has actually been released a couple of days ago. And thirdly, EU data residency for refined Toolkit Cloud will be available by the end of this year. So what does Q1 look like for 2024? So the migration assistant is going to be first available or refined for Confluence. We're working on that very hard, and that will be out soon. The migration assistant then will be available for refined for JSM in Q1 2024. And in that quarter, we're also going to be working on improving the search experience. So what that means is that there will be more options to customize the search dialog so that you can help your users find what they're looking for more quickly. And we're also working on a new HTML macro for Refine or Toolkit Cloud that will be available in Q1. Looking ahead in 2024, what we can share is that we will be working on Refine Analytics. This will help you monitor how your sites are used. So for example, page views, search terms, and other types of data points that can help you optimize your site. And finally, be on the lookout for updated macros in Refine Toolkit Cloud, where you'll be able to unlock new designs and more editing options. In addition, the page builder will also be available for Refine Toolkit Cloud. So with that, I hope you came away with some tips and an understanding of what factors can help you in your migration journey. And yes, we are looking forward to getting these features out to you. And we're working very hard to get the migration assistant out very soon. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Raj.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Eric and Dennis. And as Eric referred to, we have a public roadmap that's available at our help site, help.refine.com. And as Eric mentioned, we'll send these links out after the webinar as well. In case you missed them now, we will send them later on. Also, just to reiterate what Eric mentioned, we do have resources in place for you. If you need more information on Migrating Refined, want to read up in depth in terms of feature comparisons, or just simply need to get in touch with us, got the migration site guides on our help site. We also have migration assistance in place. You can reach out to our support team if you get stuck or have questions. And we can also do a one-to-one migration assessment pre-migration if you want some high-level tips on how to best translate your server data center sites and optimize these for cloud. And then, of course, the partner network that we have for hands-on help. If you need help connecting with a partner or would like us to put you in touch, reach out and we can make that happen as well. All right. So now we're going to take a look at some of the questions that came in during the webinar. We have a question about, is the migration assistant available now? And if not, when?
So I could take that. So as I mentioned, we're working hard to get that out to you as soon as possible. So the first release will be migration support for Refine for Confluence. And then in Q1 2024, there will be support for Refine for JSM migration.
Excellent. Thanks, Eric. Next question, is the form support for JSM or Confluence?
So this is for JSM.
We also have a question about macro migration and will the tool migrate them? And I can answer this one. So due to the way that our cloud app, the main Refine for Confluence app is set up, it means that on cloud, we've bundled macros in Refine Toolkit for Confluence Cloud instead. So your macros from Refine for Confluence are migrated to Refine Toolkit on the cloud side. And we have full migration guides on help.refine.com that contain details on what exactly is migrated, the differences and similarities between the macros, and how to go about the migration. But short answer, they're migrated with your spaces as long as Toolkit is installed on the cloud side. And then a question about how editing Confluence content works on cloud and whether you can edit via the refined interface. Should I take this? I can take this. Okay, so the default behavior on cloud with the parallel setup is that the edit goes via the Confluence Cloud interface. So if you have edit permissions on a page, then you can click a shortcut to edit and then go to the Confluence Cloud interface, make your changes. Once you publish, that's the version shown on Refined. That being said, we also have an embedded page feature that's in beta for now, which lets you edit via the Refined interface. However, there are a couple of limitations there. For example, the custom domains can't be used on a site if you're using that. So read up on it on our help center if you want the more information, or reach out for more information. And then we have a question about the current situation in relation to assets on cloud, so the assets field, and using this on Refined for JSM on cloud. I'll ask for Eric's help on this one. As I understand it, I think we're waiting on some APIs from Atlassian here.
Yeah, we currently don't support that over on Refined Cloud. However, we're in constant discussion with Atlassian to open up those APIs for us. And once that is done, it will definitely be something that is on our priority list to support. But we can also give you some more information on exactly where we are in those discussions.
All right. Let's see. There are a couple more questions, but we're also running short on time. So we'll reach out to anyone with the answers to those after the webinar. But on that note, we want to thank you all for joining us this afternoon or morning, depending on where you are. I hope this has been useful. And as mentioned, we will send out the recording and some resources after this. If you have any questions, if you need to get in touch, you can email us at support@refine.com or simply go to help.refine.com. Yeah, thank you very much.